Hey guys, this is Josh with Budget Mechanic, and today I want to show you how to change your power steering fluid yourself. Now, every car's power steering fluid needs to be changed, but a lot of them are different intervals and at different mileages. So check your manual to find out when yours needs to be done. And if it doesn't list it, you can actually visually inspect your fluid and know when it needs to be changed. So if it's not clear, if it's getting dark or black or brown, anything but that clear fluid, it's starting to get particles in it. And this power steering fluid actually acts as a hydraulic fluid, so it's under a lot of pressure. It pushes your wheels left and right when you're turning so that it's not hard. And it also lubricates the system. But when particles start getting introduced because it breaks down and gets old, it actually starts to eat away at the seals, eats away at the pump, at the rack and pinion, and those can all be really expensive fixes. So you want to stay on top of your power steering fluid. Now, when it actually comes to changing the fluid, you can buy equipment like vacuum pumps and stuff like that, which is what a professional mechanic would use. And that does make it slightly easier. But if you're just going to be doing it on your own car and you want to do it quick and cheap, I'm going to show you how to do that now. So the way that this system works is you fill the power steering with fluid, and the pump creates a lot of pressure and shoves it into the rack and pinion, allows you to turn your wheel side to side, and then it carries back through a low pressure to the reservoir, and the process continues. So what we're going to do is interrupt that, and it's going to return into our bucket, and we're going to keep putting fresh fluid into the reservoir, and eventually it's going to purge the system of the old fluid and be all fresh and good. The trick is we want to do this without introducing any air, because air bubbles get in there and it wrecks the whole process and it makes it more complicated. So the first thing we want to do is find our power steering reservoir. Okay, so here's the reservoir in this car. It's usually going to be some sort of like a clear plastic cup or jug. And somewhere on the top is usually going to say, use only power steering fluid, and that's how you know that's your reservoir. This is the power steering pump on this car, and you can see that the line goes straight from the pump to the reservoir. The line we're going to be messing with is the return line. It's the small one at the bottom, and that's where the low pressure fluid comes back into the reservoir. So when you're checking if your fluid needs to be changed or not, you can tell by the color. So some power steering fluid reservoirs will have a dipstick and you can pull it out and check the fluid color. This one doesn't, so I'm just going to take a screwdriver and dip it. And I can kind of tell it's got a pretty dark color to it. It looks like motor oil. Whereas this is what brand new fluid looks like. Totally clear for the most part. So other signs that your power steering fluid is getting dirty is it's getting harder to turn your steering wheel, or you'll start hearing noises, like whining noises coming from your power steering pump. So when you're hearing those or feeling those things, you want to check your fluid. Make sure that A, it's not low, and B, it's not getting really dirty. So to do this job, we're going to need some hose to plug into our return line so that we can get it into a drain pan. I like clear, so I can see the fluid coming, but it doesn't have to be oil hose or anything like that. Just go to the hardware store and get some clear plastic hose. The sizes of every car's return line could be a little different, so you want to check that out before you go and buy some. So the first thing we're going to want to do is empty that reservoir of all the fluid that's in there, because if we take off the return line before we empty it, all that fluid is going to dump out all over our car and our driveway, which is fine if you're into that. Alternatively, get a turkey baster or a little hand fluid pump, something to suck out that fluid out of the reservoir. And if you don't have any of those things, there's always the old siphon method. So if you are going to do the siphon method, you can use that clear plastic hose to double up as your reservoir drain. So we're going to put our bucket on the ground because it's got to be lower than the reservoir for the siphon to work. Just going to pop the cap of the reservoir and stick the hose all the way into the bottom. Now I'm going to suck it through. I've got a nice long hose so that it doesn't go in my mouth. And basically, once I get the fluid to like here or lower than the reservoir, it should start to pull itself out. This is pretty slow, but it's free. We're just gonna let the last of the fluid drain out of the hose. This is what came out. This is how it should look. So the next step is gonna be remove the return line from the reservoir. It's usually the smallest line at the lowest point on the reservoir, and it's got a little clamp right there. You wanna be really careful with this step because if your car's old, that nipple on the reservoir loves to snap off. So you don't want to get too wild when you're taking the clamp or the hose off. A little fluid is going to come out because it's going to be in the end of the hose, so you want to put a rag under there, underneath everything. Weasel the hose back and forth, being gentle as I can, and I'm going to lift it up so that it's not draining any more than has to come out. Okay, so now we have to do two things. We basically have to plug that nipple coming out of the bottom of the reservoir so that when we add clean fluid, it doesn't just run out. We're going to plug that. Then we're also going to extend this return line so that we can get it out into a drain bucket. I found that this hose I have, I think it's 3/8 outer diameter, fits inside the return line pretty snug. Okay, I'm going to put this hose clamp on just so that it's a super snug fit. You don't want it blowing out and spilling fluid everywhere. So as you can see, we're inside now. We had a little difficulty at the shop, so we had to push the car inside. Okay, so you're going to want to plug the nipple coming off the reservoir for that return line now that you've removed the hose. So you can just throw a piece of tubing on the end of that nipple, fold it over with a zip tie and crimp it so it doesn't come out. I'm just going to use an old latex glove, shove it over there, and then hold it on with like this O-ring. You could use a rubber band, just whatever. It's nothing high pressure, just something to keep the fluid from coming out of that port. What we want to do now is lift the car off the ground because we're going to be using the steering wheel to turn the wheels all the way left and right a whole bunch of times to pump that old fluid out of the lines. And so it's much easier, obviously, if the wheels are off the ground. And as always, on the front wheel drive cars, if you're going to lift both wheels off the ground, make sure you set your e-brake. Okay, I'm going to fill up the reservoir now with clean fluid, and I'm going to keep filling it as the old stuff is pumped out of the system. Okay, so now for the fun part. We're going to use the car's steering system and your arm to pump out the old fluid. The way we do that is just turning the wheel all the way to the right, all the way to the left, get that power steering rack working and pumping out the old fluid, sucking in the new fluid. So once you've got the clear fluid now coming out, you want to refill the reservoir one more time with clean fluid, and then we're going to put that return line back onto the reservoir. Okay, so I'm going to remove my hose clamp that's clamping the clear line in. Pull that carefully out. And I'm actually going to take the hose clamp off because I added that. Next thing I'm going to do, a little bit delicate, rapid maneuver, is we're going to pull the plug or the latex glove off and then quickly plug it with our fingers so that we don't lose fluid out of the reservoir. And that way we can get our black hose in position to slip it on without losing too much fluid. We've got lots of rags down here to catch any spills. Work this on. Again, being careful, this is the weak point of this reservoir. We don't want to like do a lot of side to side motion on this nipple. Okay, so now I can put the cap on, pull my glove out of there, pull the rags out. So before you drop the car back down to the ground, you want to start it up and check if you got any air in the system. Basically what would happen if there was air leaks is you'd hear a sound, a whining sound, or you could pop the cap on your reservoir and you'd see foam like on a latte coming to the top of the fluid. And if you have that, it's not a huge deal, but you want to work that out before you go on. And essentially what you do is you turn the car off, let the bubbles settle, start it back up, turn left and right, turn it off, check for bubbles. If there's bubbles, let them dissipate. And you basically repeat this process until all the air is worked up to the top. You don't want to let it run with air bubbles circulating through because it's just going to make it a lot harder to get the bubbles out, and it's going to be hard on your pump. But as long as you don't see any bubbles on the top, you're good to go. Drop the car back down and check your level and top off if you need it. Well guys, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching. And as always, please subscribe and leave a comment, and we'll see you next time.